Good evening, gearheads. Welcome to your Sunday night with Speed City, our first show of 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. This is Jon Massengale, and
Happy New
I'm in
Year!
this studio in Austin, Texas, and that's Jonathan Green. He's down in New Zealand. We'll talk all about why he's there. We got Bob Varsha with us from his home studio in Atlanta. Bob, I'll start with you. How are you? Happy New Year.
Well, I've been better. I can say Happy New Year to you. It's been a very difficult holiday season for me physically, but hopefully, as Jonathan was kind enough to point out, it can only go uphill from here. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Jonathan Green, you're down in New Zealand, in Taupo. What's going on?
Happiest man in Christendom. Yeah, I'm at the center of Formula racing at this point in the year because really there's not much going on, and there's a Middle East Championship, but we've got a fantastic field of 18, including 5 American drivers and some really big names in terms of guys that have never been here, like the current Australian supercar champion, Will Brown. And Helmut Marko sent his next Liam Lawson, which is a guy called Alvin Lindblad.
Alvin Lindblad. Wow, 6 Americans though. That's the most ever. I mean, have you been going down there forever? I think that's the most I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it's the strongest field we've ever had, no question. What's interesting is outside of just the Americans, there are a couple of Australians who did F4 in America this year. And a couple of Canadians as well. So, we really do have a strong contingent of almost 10 drivers that are racing currently in either F4 or FR in America.
Well, we're going to talk all about that. We're going to hear you've got lots of those stories, but that's Bob Varsha. And Bob, I want to start with you because we're going to talk some Formula One. We got lots to talk about. We got the 2025 season coming up. It's going to sneak up and be on us before we know it. But I want to start with some good news, actually.
Let's hope so.
Before I even get into that, Bob, I want to start with some good news. The band is staying together for 2025. All of us are going to be continuing on all of our Formula One shows that we do on satellite radio, and Chris Medlin is going to stick with us for that as well. So we got the band back together, and we probably are not going to have Dave O'Neill much this year, just like last year, because the man has way too many jobs and hats, and I can barely even get him to return a text these days because he is so busy. But we'll get him when we can. So, but that's start with some good news.
Well, it's for a good reason. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, Dave's he's the team principal of the Juncos Hollinger IndyCar team, and he's of course the boss of S's Racing here in Austin. He is staying very busy. But
can I just pause and say he's also the man I think made the best Winter Series decision.
Yes.
In American motorsport by taking on Connor Daly finally.
Yes.
And I'd like to add to that with a question. Connor recently posted that he's coming off a 24-hour fast. He didn't say why he was doing it. He just mentioned how hungry he was, which I get. Could that possibly be our man Dave telling Connor he needs to drop a few pounds?
Well, the budget's not big at Juncos, so maybe he's saying, "Look, you're going to get a peanut butter sandwich, and that's about it."
Well, the poor guy.
Well,
but he is pretty burly for an IndyCar driver, I have to say.
Well, he's also diabetic, and so that might have something to do with it.
Yeah, that's
Good
true.
point.
I forgot about that. Yep. Well, Bob, you put in a really good story that I want to start with because 2025, half of the grid. At least half, depending on how you define it, is either going to be new to the series or new to their team. And because we're gonna talk about all the different rookies. And let's start with the veterans, though, because we got Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Esteban Ocon, Liam Lawson, depending on how we define him, and Nico Hulkenberg, all with new teams. But starting with the list the way you wrote it, Bob, Carlos Sainz going to Williams, that to me that's a pretty seismic move for Williams, don't you think, Bob?
Well, it is for Sainz as well. And I think there's more than a few fans who are going to be right on the edge of their seats to see if James Bowles and his team at Williams can come up with a car that suits Carlos Sainz's talent. We talked about it before. I think, with all due respect to Lewis Hamilton, who took Sainz's seat at Ferrari, I think it was very much a questionable move given the way Sainz performed on the second half of the season. So, all the best to Carlos. I think they can put the right car under him, and then he and Alex Albon can have a big old time. And it'd be great to see Williams potentially moving toward the front of the field once again.
I don't know if that's going to happen. I've seen quotes from James Vowles, team principal of Williams, talking about they're basically focusing on 2026. But what were you going to say, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you've read, but one man who's been quite outspoken about the decision of Sainz to move from Ferrari says it's a big mistake for Ferrari to lose Sainz, and that's Eddie Jordan. And obviously, Eddie's got a track record of young drivers and knows what he's talking about. And, I think there is some credence to the fact that the on-form man, I mean, it's going to be hard for even a 7-time world champion like Hamilton to get to grips with that Ferrari the way that Sainz had got to grips with that. And really, you'd have to argue that they may have weakened their hand a little bit for next year.
Mm.
Yeah, it's it's just one of the questions that will be answered when the rubber finally hits the road in Melbourne. But one of those biggest questions will be, does Lewis still have the magic that let him, take over 100 poles, win over 100 races, and take 7 world championships? I know there's an enormous legion of fans who'd love to see him get that 8th title, especially after the bad feeling following 2021, when a lot of folks feel he was robbed by it. But to get to the larger point about James Vowles and the Williams team, this is a really strange year. We're going to find out who the great managers are, because the teams are now free as of January 1st to work on their 2026 cars, which are going to be vastly different from their 2025 cars. So what do? You try to put your best foot forward with what is basically last year's car and try to score as many points as you can, or do you devote all your resources toward the 2026 car? Now, maybe that's not a tough decision for Williams because not much is expected of them. But for the McLarens and Ferraris and Mercedes and so on, you've got to manage under the spending cap to pull 2 programs together rather than 1.
Yeah, no doubt. And later in the show, we're going to predict our predictions for Constructors Championship, Drivers Championship, and all that. So we'll talk about that.
Fool's errand.
Yeah, but it's funny. You've got all these rookies and all these drivers in different teams. It's really just added another mix to it. On one hand, it may be fairly stable because of what you just said, where a lot of teams are going to be focused on 2026. But on the other hand, we have all these teams and new cars and new drivers in the field. It's going to be really fun. But you mentioned Hamilton and that one being one of the big stories. I chose that as my favorite story to watch for 2025 last year at the end of the year when Chris and I did a show. And I'm going to stick with that. As much as I'm excited to see how Lawson does and all these other rookies, depending on how you define them, I still think that's going to be the story that I'm going to have my eyeballs on the most. What about you, Greenie? What about Hamilton?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've been saying it all last season. The biggest, I really don't care where Ferrari, I mean, I do care where they finish, but my big interest is going to be Saturday afternoon, the difference between Leclerc and Hamilton in each and every qualifying session and practice session. But qualifying, I think, is where, especially these 2 men, they pride themselves on the one-lap wonder. Hamilton has a history of being the greatest of all time. He eclipsed Senna a few years ago, and he was known as the greatest. Schumacher was also a one-lap wonder. But Leclerc is certainly the coming man when it comes to one lap. And sometimes a Ferrari has been good to him, sometimes it hasn't. There's no question that Hamilton's had the tools with Mercedes in the last decade. So now in the same car, whether it's a crap car and they're 15th and 16th, or whether they're fighting for pole, that to me is going to be fascinating.
Well, the last one of
along these lines.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I was just going to say, Jonathan recommended an article by our Chris Medlin, which I read, and it's a brilliant little piece. It's his wishes for 2025.
Yeah.
The 5 or 6 things he wants or he would like to see happen to enliven what already looks like it's going to be a terrific year.
Yeah, no doubt. I
Yeah,
think.
go to racer.com for that one.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then last of the veterans, I'm going to call it, and we're going to move Lawson over to the rookies for the next segment, but is Hulkenberg. And I'm just, I'm a big fan of Hulkenberg, especially after what he did last year, really, showing
Mhm.
that the Haas
Yeah.
car, taking advantage of the Haas car because the enhancements that they did throughout the year, which is a change for them. I was excited for Hulkenberg, but I'm not so sure that this move is going to be a great one for him in 2025 necessarily. What do you think, Bob?
Well, it's kind of like the Carlos Sainz to Williams sort of situation. These guys want to continue their careers. They want to get the best seat they can get into. And I think Nico Hulkenberg clearly was attracted to the Sauber seat because it's going to be Audi, a fellow German company, going forward into 2026. So, it makes great logical sense for Hulkenberg to move over there, and we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but one thing I would mention is two teams have two new drivers, and that's Haas and Audi. And that's always the lineage is broken if you don't have two drivers that have driven for the team. Now, Behrman obviously has raced with Haas or knows the Haas and has been around. And obviously, I don't worry about Hulkenberg, but he has a brand new teammate. It's going to be a struggle. There's going to be a lot of learning to be done in a team where both drivers are new to the 200 or 300 people looking after them. And then finally, how stable is Audi these days? The more I read in the auto industry, Audi and Volkswagen are, in real trouble. So they're coming into Formula One at a strange time in the industry for them. And I mean, Germany's going through a tough patch as well. But it remains to be seen how Audi will get on top of things. Now, they're a brilliant racing team stroke entity over the years. And if they commit, they commit. But they almost need to stay in Formula One because they need the goodwill, as Renault did when they were in Formula One.
Yeah, they really need a knowledgeable iron hand to run that operation. Germany, like several countries in Europe, is really governed in part by very powerful unions that the companies, they have union representatives on the board of directors of companies like Audi and Volkswagen and so on. So, there's a lot going on behind the scenes there. And as Jonathan says, there seems to be a little bit of disarray, but let's hope that's deceptive and they're actually going great guns the way they did in sports car racing back in the day.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Jonathan, the whole car industry, is shaken up because of this race to electric, and then the slow adoption after the great start that all these manufacturers had with EVs. Now it's slowed, and people are leaning more towards hybrids for the moment. So we'll see how that plays out. There is one more driver that's a veteran that's moving, and that's, you mentioned it, Jonathan, that Haas has a new driver, and that's Esteban Ocon who's moving there. So that'll be interesting to see. And like you said, that dynamic. All right, well, let's get a quick break in. When we come back, we're going to talk about the rookies of 2025 right after this. All right, let's check in with the YouTubers. We got Mike Bowles, Kevin Kelly, David Lawrence. Hey, guys, what's going on? Happy New Year, gang, David says. Awesome team, 2025. Thanks, KK. Yep, we're going to be all back. And yeah, David, Audi should have stayed in sports car racing. Yeah, time will tell. I hope that they, like Jonathan and Bob were just talking about, I hope they do well, but we shall see. You know what? Speaking of the auto industry, I had a little story in here. The CEO of Honda, he had a very interesting quote. I thought that was really.
I love this story.
Yeah, that's great.
He was at a press conference, and the press asked him, "Why would Nissan make a good partner?" And he said, "That's a difficult one." And that's the Honda CEO, Toshiro Mibe. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but this is the CEO of Honda saying this about this new partnership. That's scary.
Well, yeah, let's tell it like it is. The Japanese can't lie, and also.
All right, we're coming.
I'm George Russell, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back to your Sunday night with Speed City. We're talking about the rookies of 2025. Let's run down those, and we'll qualify it because I'm going to go ahead and go with 6, and that's any of those who have not done a full season. That's Bortoleto, Hajar, Doohan, Behrman, Antonelli, and Lawson. And I was looking at all these drivers and looking at our interviews from last year. Did you guys realize that we had exclusive interviews with 5 of these 6? We did not get Isaac Hajar, but all of the rest of them we had exclusive interviews throughout the year at some time or another. And
what would you expect?
I know. I was just excited. Yeah, excited that we got to get all those. But Johnny Green, I'll start with you. Pick who you want to start with. Maybe you're most excited about, or maybe most interesting. What do you think?
As in?
The rookies.
Colapinto, I think, in terms of what's next for him. I do think he's going to be a story in the background regardless, given that he's next man up if any of the Hajars any of the decisions made don't work. And I still think he may find a role somewhere working, getting some drives. But Behrman is the one that really interests me in terms of, a bit like Lawson, we've seen a few glimpses, and what he did with Ferrari and Bahrain, a 7th place, brilliant. New team, but not a new team in terms of they already know him and he knows them. He's going to have his work cut out. Ocon is not going to give him an inch. Ocon has never given any of his teammates an inch, like him or not like him, as in a driver. So Ocon is going to be a fantastic test for Behrman. I make one point. They did a super formula test right after Abu Dhabi, and Behrman went to that. And interestingly enough, a former champion of the Toyota Racing Series, Igor Fraga, was fastest. Behrman was only 15th fastest in that.
Oh.
So it shows 2 things. It shows that the super formula field, as Lawson proved to us last week, is very strong and very good. But it also shows that, there's a lot of talent out there in Formula 2 and Super Formula. And Behrman's just one of many, I think. So I'm interested to see what he could do. I like him. I think he's good. He's got a touch of the George Russells about him. He's confident, British, and hardworking. And I think he's going to be really interesting for Haas.
Yeah.
I'd compare him definitely to George Russell. That same bulldog approach, with a lot of skills. Now, I'll just, deal with semantics here for a moment. I didn't include Liam Lawson in my collection of rookies because he's got 11 starts in Formula One over 2 years.
Yeah,
but it's
his first full season.
Mm-hmm.
Which
I don't think makes you a rookie.
No, but it also it's a way of saying to, if you want to be critical about Red Bull's decision, and there are the haters. I've been looking at all the forums about Liam. Liam's here this weekend, so I'm hoping to talk to him this weekend here in Taiwan.
Oh, he is. That's great.
And he's coming to do he's coming to just be a guest, but he's coming to watch the historic race here. There's an historic Grand Prix as well as the Toyota Racing Series, and so. But I mean, the criticism is that Red Bull have kind of shot themselves in the foot again by taking on a rookie, and it didn't work out for Albon, it didn't work out for Gasly, and so there's a feeling that he could be overawed by Max Verstappen. I don't think so.
You think Yuki Tsunoda would have been a better promotion?
No.
Okay, I agree.
I mean, I think what I guess I was getting at was that, Red Bull, it's a poison chalice. We all know it. And, we've seen it with Prost and Senna. We've seen it with, Damon Hill and Ayrton Senna. It's hard to pair against and Schumacher, obviously. So there's no winning. If you want to have an experienced driver, and Ferrari did it with a Lacey and Irvine and so on back in the day, Red Bull could have gone and gone with Sainz, for example, and brought him back to the front of Russell, or at least half a second. If he does that, I'll be impressed. But I think he's pushed it through early and I've got a story about what Helmut Marko's doing it down here in a similar fashion to get ready for 26, because it will be a new era. And with 1 year under his belt, good or bad, he's got a full season of 24 races at every track with every data, all the mistakes he might have made, all the comparison to George Russell. And you're right, there is a family connection. They're good friends, and he has given him the golden ticket in many ways. So, and I think that's true of Bertoletto too, is that Audi feel the same way, which is you've got a good guy in Hulkenberg. He could teach you the ropes. And then I will judge both those two at the end of 26.
Yeah. All right. What about Jack Doohan stepping in for Esteban Ocon, sitting next to Pierre Gasly at Alpine? What do you think about that one, Greeny?
I actually think he's going to be the surprise of the year. I actually think I like him, and I think he's really smart. And just watching him on TV, and not that that's a thing, but he's very erudite. He's very forthright. He's been in the wings like Lawson for many years with Alpine. He knows the ropes. It depends what Alpine come up with as a car. So you can only really judge him against Gasly, who, let's face it, was on fire at the end of the season. But I really do think he's going to hold his own. I think he's going to be top 10 every weekend.
It's interesting because I think Doohan and Bortoleto, who will be at Sauber, are the two new faces I, speaking only for myself, know the least about. We didn't see an awful lot of them.
No.
Yes, we saw that Doohan is very as erudite, as you say, very well spoken, very telegenic. But I really don't know what he's capable of doing, and so we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, our interview with him last year, if you recall, he walked up to Chris in the middle of the grid, didn't know Chris was live across North America, and was just chatting with him. And when Chris told him that, he immediately put on his corporate voice and started doing
flip the switch.
Exactly, doing the corporate. But he was great, though. He was very very fun. But look, let's not forget, he's the son of a MotoGP legend, Mick Doohan, too. So
yes,
he comes from a racing family. So it will be fun. But so we've talked about Antonelli, Bortoletto a little bit. What about Isaac Hadjar?
There's another one we don't know very much about.
Yeah.
No.
We really don't, do we?
He did good. I mean, he had a phenomenal season. I mean, he was top-tastic in F2. But then again, there's my problem with F2 and F3 is that by putting it behind the paywall, none of us really know a great deal. And I mean, yes, you could argue, okay, go and spend some money, Johnny, and find out, or call up, Alex Brundle and find out about him. But you're right. We haven't seen the metal of him. He did well in the tests at Abu Dhabi afterwards. And by all accounts, he's fast. I think he will perform. I don't think he'll perform near Yuki, anywhere near Lawson.
Yeah. I think the fact that he was such a late nomination to that seat tells you something about, Red Bull's opinion of his potential. He was
And I'll tell you something else. We're going to talk about the Toyota Racing Series, but it's relevant now. Last minute this week, literally, they've confirmed Arvin Lindblad of the UK, who is the next Red Bull Junior in line after Isaac Hadjar. He's just finished Prema F4 in 4th place, has got vast experience, has succeeded everywhere he's gone. And won the Macau Grand Prix back in 23 in F4. He's good, and he's going to be racing in F2 for Campos. And the reason he's come to New Zealand is Helmut Marko has said we need him to get as many of the 18 super license points as possible, so that we can give him free practice time in 25 at 17 if we get the dispensation, and he'll be ready to go in 26. So you can see that already he's leapfrogging Hadjar, or at least hedging his bets as he always does, just in case Hadjar doesn't come through, because they don't think Yuki's got a future with the team.
Listen to the ages of these guys. Isaac Hadjar is 20.
Yeah.
Bortoletto is 20. Antonelli, 18. Behrman, 19. Doohan, 21. And, of course, Liam Lawson. We'll include him out for now. 22, yeah. He's the old man of the bunch, yeah.
I think this will be equal to or perhaps the youngest grid in Formula One history, averaging about 27 years of age. I've seen discussions on the internet that say, well, in Melbourne in 2017, the average age was 26 years and something. But that race went forward with 19 cars because 35-year-old Fernando Alonso in his McLaren couldn't make the start. So they just took the grid of 19 cars in Melbourne, averaged it out and said, okay, this is the youngest lineup. I'm talking about the big picture, the entire guys who have contracts to get in those cars. And I think this will be the youngest ever.
Yeah. And Fernando.
Yeah. And when you look at the risks, if you will, of youngsters like Verstappen, like Kimi Raikkonen, both world champions, and like Oscar Piastri, all of those have shown that the system works. And so I would actually say this is a celebration of F3 and F2 that they are able to bring the talent through at a young age, wean them in, and make them into potential world champions.
All right, guys, let's get a break in. When we come back, we're going to talk about the New Zealand race driving series, the Formula Regional Oceania Championship, right after these messages. All right. Thanks, Mike Bowles. Nice mentions there. He's talking about the crack team of SCB and Casey's. You guys don't realize how good Casey is. He's actually a lot more than just a producer. Keeps this whole building running. Let's see. I had one other story.
I thought he was the mayor of Austin.
He's the mayor of this building for sure. I had a really good story that I put in here for these breaks, and I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but NBC Motorsports did a preview for the IMSA series this year. It's really good. Lee Diffie hosted it, and they had a bunch of. And they had it on NBC last night, Saturday night, but they put it on YouTube today, I noticed. So you can watch it anywhere and everywhere at your leisure and at whatever speed you like if they're not talking fast enough. I like that on YouTube. I just thought that was a good one. I watched about half of it today. I didn't get to watch all of it, but I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, it's going to be a good year for IMSA. They are really, really on the bounce.
Yep. All right, coming back. That was a quick break.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Been listening or watching Speed City for a few years. You know that this time of year we love it because Jonathan Green always goes down to New Zealand for what used to be called the Toyota Racing Series, now called the Formula Regional Oceania Championship. And it's part of the Formula Regional official FIA series that becomes the feeder series into really what is intended to go to Formula One, Formula Two, and the FIA Formula 3. But Jonathan, we've had an amazing number of these drivers over the years on our show. We've had Lando Norris back when he was with the Toyota Racing Series. We've had Lance Stroll. We've had others as well that you'll help me remember, but also the number of drivers that are currently in Formula One. You have that in that list, don't you, that have come through there?
Yeah. It's currently quarter of the F1 field. So Guan Yu Zhao is obviously a reserve driver, but he's a fully fledged Formula One super license holder. So that's the one that's the outlier. But yes, Lando Norris, Lance Stroll, Colapinto, Yuki Tsunoda, and Liam Lawson.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing that so many of those come through this tiny little series that I bet you even a lot of motorsports fans have never even heard of. But talk about it real quick. Just give us a quick overview, Jonathan, and how it works.
You call it a tiny series, but at the same time, they're doing 3,500 kilometers of racing in 5 weeks. So that's the equivalent of an entire IndyCar / Formula One season. And in fact, Jet Bolin did over 3,000. That's an American from Dallas, Texas. He did the most laps last year and it was 3,500 laps. So the amount of what you're cramming into your brain in learning. I mean, you talk about learning the violin or something. There's your 10,000 hours. I mean, it's incredible what they're doing. And if they keep it on the straight and narrow, which is really what I look for, because it's such a lottery to go 5 weeks in a row and not have a mechanical or not have a prang with somebody else. Everybody's looking for, the points. And that is the big underlying thing. Yes, these guys are 16 to 22, some of them older, and I will talk about that in a minute. But the bottom line is there are 18 super license points up for grabs for the winner. And so I'm saying this series is halfway to Formula One because, 18 and you keep them for 3 years, you only need to go to Indy Next or to FIA F3, and potentially a good season after 5 weeks here could put you literally knocking on the door of Formula One with a super license at the end of this year. So some of these 16, 17-year-olds could be right where Bertoletto and Antonelli are at the end of this year.
We played a clip last week of Liam Lawson, who was talking about how Super Formula was advantageous for him to use that platform because it was so competitive. But he said he was able to do that series rather than go to Formula 2 again or something because he had built up so many super license points. How many points do you recall, Jonathan, how well he did in New Zealand?
Well, he won the championship, so he got the full 18. And he then went to Super Formula and was runner-up. So that pretty much... that was it.
You said something before we went on the air, Jonathan, that I thought was interesting. And it says something about the attention being paid to this series. If it wasn't before, it is now. And that's the fact that the Kingmaker, Chip Ganassi's name is on one of these cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a massive story, and it's yet to be written, as it were. This is something that happened, funnily enough, at COTA. I've been aware of it for a while, and it's just taken a long time to get done. But to backtrack, Kiwi Motorsport, or Crosslink Kiwi Motorsport as they're known in the States, have dominated the first decade of F4 and FR in America. They've won more titles than anybody else. They've had more success than anybody else. But they also, during this time, the New Zealand summer, come home to New Zealand. It's a Kiwi-run team, Tina Larson and Gary Orton. And then they race in the Toyota series, and they have done for many years. I mean, for example, they ran Colapinto at this level to third place in the championship in 2020. Colapinto beating Yuki Tsunoda, for example. So yes. Then the association is that Chip Ganassi has been looking closely at how FR and F4 have produced, drivers like Kyle Kirkwood and Malukas and Rasmussen and many others, and suddenly turned around and went, I'm not on top of the junior. I need to know who's coming through. So he's partnered up with Kiwi Motorsport, the most successful junior team in America, and put his stickers on the car. So he is basically given the mandate here in New Zealand to say, find me some future stars. And that is great. And the other factor I'll put on that is that Chip's no fool. And the reason why he's thinking that is, guess what? The top 4 in Indy Next last season all graduated from the TRS series, the champion being Foster, the Brit, who came here just for 3 rounds last year, but just blew it away in Indy Next. And he puts a lot of that reason for the 3,000 kilometers he got down here, last year.
That's really amazing, isn't it? This series, I called it little, and I was thinking that because I was looking around and seeing how many like social media hits and like the YouTube views and stuff, and they just don't get much. That's the part that's stunning to me, is that all the what you just said, the top 4 in Indy Next, and all these Formula One drivers, and they just don't get enough, and we're going to try to help that. But Granny, you said 6 Americans, right?
5 Americans and a Canadian, and like I said, 10 of them all raced in either F4 or FR from other countries like Australia, for example. Statties is one of the Australians. James Lawley, another one of the Australians coming to this series. So there's been a huge influx. But yeah, we've got Jet Bowling returning. who is a young kid from Dallas, Texas. We've had him on the show. He got the most improved driver last year. And I'm a big believer, a bit like Macau Grand Prix. It's a really maelstrom field to 5 weeks. And I think the first year you do it, it's just coming at you so fast. The tracks are small. It's hard to overtake. The car might be different than you've driven, although the Tata chassis is used in America. So Jet has gone from a season where he was occasionally top 10, but most improved, got the most miles, then did FR, got third overall in FR, behind another guy who came down here last year, Titus Sherlock, and another guy from Texas. And the championship was won by the Rookie of the Year here in Toyota, Patrick Woods-Toth, who we had on the show, as you know, from COTA, the champion of FR this year. So there's no question it's been a great breeding ground for young Americans. And I also think this is, the Chip Ganassi thing is just the beginning, because Americans, as you well know, haven't committed to going to Europe because it's not an easy place to go. I don't need to tell you they wouldn't be fans of necessarily, I'll be political for a second, of going to the Middle East to race. So New Zealand is a great home to hone their skills pre-season if you've got the money. It's about 176,000 to do all 5 rounds, which actually is pretty reasonable for a season of FIA F3, or not FIA, FRECA, excuse me. So it's cheaper than a FRECA season, and you combine it into 5 weeks. It's also a lot of fun. They get to do a lot of tourism stuff as well. New Zealand's a great country. They speak the language. It's safe. Et cetera, et cetera. A lot of them bring their families down because they're 16. They can't drive a road car. So it tends to be a really warm and fuzzy feel in the hospitality, because mum and dad are there in the hospitality watching you. You're learning from people like Stephen Giles runs the team, Mika Hakkinen's engineer back in the day when he won the World Championship. People like Martin Donnelly are here as a driver coach. Roberto Moreno is here as a driver coach. So there's some big names involved in the background, as it were.
And more about the series itself. How many different circuits? How many different places?
5 different circuits, 3 races at each round.
Okay. And they're also doing
on both islands.
Okay. And they're also doing some other stuff too. Like, wasn't it last year they started a synthetic fuel program as well, or some sort of?
Yes, they have a complete synthetic fuel. It is fossil free, they like to call it. And it's been they were the first to do biofuel. So again, you talk about the nice thing about New Zealand is it is small enough. And Toyota New Zealand have picked this up and spent a lot of money on it. And of course, Toyota, being a sort of rugged place that this is, their Hiluxes and their RAV4s and their Tacomas are really popular because it's a very rural farming world down here. So it's not a surprise to see Toyota sponsoring this. But at the same time, it is a great environment for these young kids to learn. It really is.
And they use it's basically similar to an F3 car, right? It's about a 300 horsepower turbocharged Toyota 4-cylinder. Does that sound right?
Yep. Turbocharged, basically based on the Corolla engine and it gets about 310 brake horsepower. It's actually quicker than the FR car in America, which is a little bit heavier.
Okay. Wow.
Where can we see these races here in the continental US?
They're live streamed. They're live streamed on what will be called. We've got a new promoter this year called Next Gen, but I will make sure that you see that. And I think I'm going to be doing quite a lot of social media as much as I can on places like Instagram and stuff, which I'll do through myself and Speed City. So I'll be constantly kind of keeping up to date. But yeah, you can watch all the races live online, and obviously go to YouTube and watch them afterwards when you're ready.
Right. Very cool.
Yeah, this is going to be another.
And by the way, our biggest fan is Helmut Marko, because the story we left out was where I was going with Isaac Hadjar, is that right back to Daniel Kvyat, the first. Well, Brendan Hartley won the first race, and he became a Red Bull Junior. But Helmut Marko and Christian Horner swear by the series because they brought Kvyat here, they brought Richard Verschoor here, obviously Lawson they signed here, they brought Lucas Auer here, the Austrian, and got him to DTM, and now they brought this new kid, Arvin Lindblad. So Red Bull, the Ferrari Academy brought Marcus Armstrong here. And we've had Alpine drivers. We had 2 Alpine Academy drivers last year. So, the thing that's created Doohan, Corti is the Italian Corti came down here last year. So we've had a really good, strong tie with the Formula One junior teams. And I know for a fact when I'm doing live commentary that those sorts of guys are tuning in because they genuinely are looking for the talent, and they can do it in a brief period of time rather than following the FIA 15-round series all the time. So, and it's a pressure cooker. This is really where this is a boot camp, if you like.
Yeah.
This is like joining the Marines. It's like, right, has he really got what it takes to handle it and handle the pressure?
You stole what I was going to say.
That leads to this upward spiral. We get media watching. You get kingmakers like Ganassi watching.
Yep.
And the drivers themselves say, okay, this is tough competition. This is what people are watching. So if I can go there and do well, I can give myself a leg up in my career.
Yeah, and I was thinking, Jonathan, obviously they're all watching, but there's bound to be some representatives from some of these teams, from these Formula One teams there with, scouts, essentially.
Yeah, for example, driver coach for Foster last year was Spencer Piggott, IndyCar driver, and we've had many. We've had many good driver coaches come down here who've got their own, experience. Jamie Walter Campbell, another sports car driver, came down here with Habsburg, who was second in the Macau Grand Prix. There's some, it's interesting, and it's a great place to be. So I think people actually want to, it's great to go motor racing where you actually want to be rather than the cold of Snetterton one Sunday morning.
Yeah, I was telling somebody you were down in New Zealand. I said, oh, good for him. He's getting some time away. That's a beautiful place. I was like, well, yeah, he does turn it into a bit of a vacation. All right, before we get off this topic, Jonathan, I got to ask you, I know it's really hard to do this because they're all so young and, they're all just coming up. Are there favorites here? Are there, you talk about one of the Red Bull guys, but are there favorites?
Well, there's no question. Arvin Lindblad was only announced last week. And so when I was looking at the field, I was almost kind of rubbing my hands with glee that there was no favorite and that we had a lot of inexperienced and returning rookies or guys that were a little bit more experienced than they were last year. So there was no obvious favorite. But since then, Lindblad has jumped in, and there's no question he is the favorite. Then you've got people like Will Brown, who is the supercar champion. Now, he's coming in because the promoter is also one of the part owners of Triple Eight in supercars. So he's got a strong connection across the pond, and he wants to see that continue. Tony Quinn is his name. And Will Brown is coming to do 3 rounds. He's not really done single-seaters before. He did Formula Ford, but he's going to be a star. And he's going to race in the Red Bull colors because he's sponsored by Red Bull. He's with Shannon van Gisbergen as we speak. And funnily enough, the Trackhouse boss is with them because they've been doing karting and midget racing and, all that sort of stuff. And so that's one to watch. But from an American point of view, Nikita Johnson is the one that keeps coming to mind. He's only 16. And he's shattering a lot of records, and there's a lot of people talking about him. So put that in your pipe. He was runner-up, I think, in the Formula US Pro 2000 Championship this year, and he's headed to GB3 this year with High Tech. And he's just 16. So I would say that even if he doesn't win, if he beats Lindblad a couple of times, I think people will start talking about, and that's great now. So the opposite is true now, which is I thought it was going to be wide open, but now these kids have a benchmark. A guy who has achieved is going to be in F2 next year with Campos, a very good team. He's got Helmut Marko earmarking him for greatness. So if you beat that kid, you're also, as basically Liam Lawson did. Auer came down that year in 2019, and Helmut Marko said, "Oh, right, go down, get some experience, and we'll get you some super license points, and we'll put you into DTM." But Lawson blew him away the first race, and by like 15 seconds. So suddenly it was like, who's this?
All right, guys, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have one little final segment on Formula One. We're going to give you our predictions for next year. Back after these messages. All right, we're still live on YouTube. Got the gang out there. He said, Mike Bowles says, is it my feed or did Jonathan Green get his Mr. V's haircut. Get his and Mr. V's, Varsha's haircut. Okay, sorry, I misread that. I don't know. I think he's got, Jonathan, you got a weird background. Actually, not weird. It's just a blank.
Well, it's
background.
blurred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just blue.
Well, unless you want to see my hotel room.
That's right.
Thank-
Witness
thank-
protection program.
Yeah.
So you know this prison.
Yeah. Let's see. So we're going to
I'm getting a
predict.
haircut tomorrow, by the way.
It's about time, Bob.
Whether it
Mine
needs it or
too.
not.
It's going.
We're going to do, like I put in the show doc, we're going to do drivers, championship, constructors. I like this one I just threw in there for fun. Different number of race winners, considering last year there was, 7, right? And,
Yeah.
Yes.
and rookie podiums. All right, coming back.
This is David Hobbs, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, we're going to take this last segment and have some fun with it and do a little predictions for the 2025 season. And I think I want to start with the probably the most prestigious of all, and that's the Drivers' Championship. And you know what, gentlemen, since I introduced this topic, I'll go first. And, the obvious answer is the current 4 consecutive champion, Max Verstappen. And I think the only one in my mind the only 2 drivers, only 2 teams that would have a shot at beating Max would be McLaren and Ferrari, which leaves a couple of drivers that could potentially do that. And I'm going to predict Lewis Hamilton as the drivers' champion for 2025. Yes, you heard it here first, but I'm going to go with that just because I think it would be so much fun. And I don't know if it's crazy to bet against Max or if Lando for that matter, because if McLaren continues with the pace they've got and Lando learned some lessons from last year, I could see him easily winning it. But I'll go to you next, Jonathan Green.
I think, can I go for 2?
Sure.
My top 2 will be Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris for the championship, followed closely by George Russell and Max Verstappen.
Okay. All right. What about you, Bob?
Can I get 4 like Jonathan?
You can have as many as you want.
I'm going to go with Lando Norris.
Okay.
I think he learned some important lessons this year, and he can apply them next year with what no doubt will be a terrific car once again.
You and I said the same thing there, and I think it's pretty obvious because Lando, he needed to learn some lessons, and so did the team. Don't you agree with that, Bob?
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I think that they had to, we saw some strategic, I don't want to call them blunders. We just saw some mistakes, some strategic mistakes by the McLaren team, pit stops, timing of pit stops and things like that. And yeah, and I think I think Lando certainly has the speed. Does he have the killer instinct or the whatever it takes? We shall see. It'll be fun to see. So, all right, next up is constructors. And I'll go first again there. And since I picked Lewis, I'm going to go with Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. Greeny?
I'm with you, Ferrari.
Yeah, okay. What about you, Bob?
McLaren. I mean, they finished every lap of the past season, with the exception of the 7 laps that Lando lost after he collided with Max Verstappen fighting for the lead. So if they got that kind of reliability that they showed at midseason and the speed that they showed at the end of the season, I think McLaren repeats.
And speaking of McLaren, the intangibles like pit stops, fastest pit stops, McLaren was right there last year. I think they and Red Bull tied for the fastest of the year at 1.9, and I don't know if you get into the hundreds and thousands and all that, but they were way up there. So that's another good reason to pick them, Bob. All right, the next one I had in here was different number of race winners, because in 2024 we had 7. We had all of the drivers in the top 4 teams, sans Checo Perez, with a win last year. So I'm going to say that's not going to be repeated, and I'm going to go with, I don't know why, but I'm going to say 4 different race winners. What about you, Jonathan?
8.
8. I like it. I like it. I like that. I like that may be close to the record. What about you, Bob?
I'll say 5.
Okay. All right. Last stat is rookie podiums. We spent the first part of the show talking about all these rookies. And let me go back up to my rookie list. And rookie podiums. Wow.
What does that mean? Rookies on the podium?
Rookies on the podium. So
Just for the.
And do we count Behrman and Lawson or not?
I think let's go with Bob's list of rookies, which is Bortoleto, Hajar, Doohan, Behrman, and Antonelli. How about that? I think that's a good list. And I'm going to say 2 of those, and I'm not going to say which 2. Why not? I'll say which 2. I'm going to say Antonelli and I'm going to say Lawson.
Oh, Lawson, absolutely. And Antonelli.
Okay.
In that order.
Any more? Anybody else?
No.
Okay. What about you, Bob?
Lawson. Oh, he decided he's not a rookie.
Oh, that's right. We did. Sorry, I'm.
It's his first season. It's a rookie season.
Okay, call it that. In that case, Lawson and Behrman.
I like it. All right. Well, we are already out of time, and I'm just checking to see if anything else we got coming up. For the next thing we're gonna have some more YouTube videos. So check our YouTube channel. Of course, we'll be back next Sunday night for your Sunday Night with Speed City. Jonathan will still be down in New Zealand, and Bob and I'll be with you. So we will talk to you next week.
Happy trails.